The first thing he saw was red against white, a strip of wool snapping in the wind at the river's bend. The Lakota warrior slid from his horse, boots crunching over the ice-crusted ground, eyes scanning for danger. When he reached the edge of the bank, the shape in the snow moved. A woman lay curled on her side, her hair matted with frost, one arm clamped protectively around a small bundle. He knelt beside her and saw her face. Blood at the lip, purple swelling across her cheekbone. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed and glassy. "You're safe now," he told her quietly in accented English, tugging his buffalo robe free to wrap around her shoulders. She shook her head weakly. "No, my baby." Her voice cracked. He looked at the bundle she held and realized it was empty, only a tiny quilt stitched with pale blue thread. "They took her," she rasped. Said a girl's not worth keeping. They're leaving her in the mountain pass." Her body jerked as she tried to sit up, and he caught her before she fell. "Who?" he asked. "My husband's brothers," she whispered, tears freezing on her lashes. "Said I shamed the family. I was supposed to give a son. They—" Her breath hitched, the words collapsing into a sob. He glanced at the sky. The storm wasn't hours away. It was already here, clouds thick and low, wind screaming between the trees. If they didn't move now, whatever trail her in-laws left would vanish under a foot of snow. He slid one arm under her knees, the other behind her back, and lifted her effortlessly. "Hold on to me," he said. She clutched the empty blanket like it was the child herself. His horse stamped nervously, ears flicking at the scent of coming weather. The warrior swung into the saddle with her in his arms, his own fur cloak wrapping around them both. "Which way?" he asked. She pointed west, towards the ridgeline where snow already fell in heavy sheets. He pressed his heels to the horse's flanks, and they surged forward into the blinding cold. In his mind, he saw the small body they might find, stiff and pale in the drifts, and forced the thought away. He had ridden through worse storms, hunted through darker nights, but never had the stakes been so small and so unbearably precious. The wind tore at them as they climbed, each gust cutting like a blade through fur and wool. The warrior's horse strained against the incline, its breath steaming in great white clouds. He kept one arm locked around the woman to steady her, the other guiding the reins as his eyes swept the ground ahead. Snow was already swallowing the earth, but there, faint depressions in the powder, too small for a man's boot. The prints were erratic, shallow, as if whoever carried the baby staggered often. "They're close," he said, his voice carrying only to her ear over the howl of the wind. She stirred against him, clutching the blanket tighter. "Please," she whispered. "Don't let her be cold." He didn't answer. The promise was already carved into his chest. A dark smear caught his attention, a scrap of cloth snagged on a low branch, thin and pale pink. He reined in sharply, pulling it free. Her gasp was raw, a wounded sound. "It's hers," she choked. "I stitched that myself." He tucked it into her hand and urged the horse onward, pushing them higher toward the pass. The snow thickened until the world shrank to a narrow tunnel of white and shadow. His eyes caught movement ahead. Two figures bent against the wind, their shapes hunched and broad. He couldn't see the child, but the way the smaller of the two carried something tight to his chest sent heat through his veins. The woman stiffened in his arms. "That's them." She didn't say their names, but he didn't need to hear them. The men were moving fast, unaware they were being followed. The warrior guided the horse off the trail, moving parallel through the trees, each step muffled by the storm. His bow was strapped across his back, but he didn't reach for it. A drawn weapon would only make them run. Instead, he waited, shadowing them until the path narrowed between two slabs of rock. Here, they would have to slow. Here, they could be taken. He slid from the saddle, lifting her down with care. "Stay with the horse," he said, his voice low but sharp. She gripped his arm. "Don't kill them," she pleaded. "Just bring her back." His jaw tightened. "I'll bring her back." Then he moved, silent as snowfall, closing the gap with each step. Ahead, one of the men turned his head and froze when he saw the dark figure rising from the storm. The taller man's hand shot to the hatchet at his belt, but the Lakota warrior was already inside the gap, snow swirling around them like a curtain. "Give me the child," he said, his voice deep and steady. The shorter man clutched the bundle tighter, stepping back until his shoulders hit rock. "She's cursed," the tall one spat. "We ain't keeping her. Ain't our fault if she freezes." The warrior's eyes narrowed. "Your fault began the moment you touched her." His gaze flicked to the baby, a faint cry breaking through the storm. That sound tightened every muscle in his body. He took another step forward, hand resting on the hilt of his knife, not to brandish it, but to make it clear that his patience had limits. The shorter man's eyes darted to his companion, then back to the warrior. "We were ordered. Her own father said it. Only a son carries the name. Daughters are mouths that don't earn." The warrior's lip curled in disgust. "You speak of names like they warm a child at night." The tall one lunged, swinging his hatchet, but the warrior sidestepped, caught his wrist, and wrenched it until bone cracked. The weapon clattered into the snow. The man dropped to his knees, clutching his arm, cursing. The shorter man panicked, holding the bundle out in front of him like a shield. "Take her then. But when the snow buries you both, don't say we didn't." The warrior was already there, pulling the baby into his arms before the sentence ended. She was smaller than he expected, cheeks flushed from cold but still warm. Alive. He loosened his cloak, tucking her against his chest, feeling the fragile rise and fall of her breath. Behind him, the mother's voice broke through the wind. "Is she—" He turned, carrying the baby toward her. She stumbled forward, falling to her knees in the snow as he placed the child in her arms. She wept into the blanket, her shoulders shaking. The warrior stood between her and the two men, his shadow stretching long in the storm. "Go back," he told them, his tone iron. "If you follow, I'll bury you before the snow does." They didn't wait for another warning. Within moments, their figures were swallowed by white. The warrior looked down at the mother and child, the bundle of life wrapped between them. "We ride now," he said, glancing at the thickening sky. "Your family may not be done with you." The wind shifted as they descended, carrying with it the faint crunch of movement that didn't belong to them. The warrior paused mid-step, eyes narrowing toward the slope behind. Snow fell heavy, but there, the faintest flicker of motion through the white, too deliberate to be an animal. He pulled the horse closer, lifting the mother into the saddle with the baby still pressed against her chest. "Hold her tight," he murmured, then swung up behind them, his cloak wrapping over all three. The trail down from the pass was narrow and treacherous, slick with ice hidden beneath fresh snow. Every few moments, he looked back. The shadows were still there, 2, maybe 3 figures, keeping their distance but never losing ground. The mother's voice was tight with fear. "It's them, isn't it?" "Not the same men," he said. "Too cautious, hunters maybe, or someone sent to finish what they started." Her grip tightened around the baby. "They won't have her." "No," he said flatly. "They won't." At a bend in the trail where a frozen pine had fallen across the path, he swung down, handing her the reins. "Stay in the saddle. When I tell you, ride." She shook her head violently, I won't leave you here." "It's not leaving," he said, his tone like flint. "It's keeping her alive." He moved quickly, pulling his bow from its leather sheath and fitting an arrow. He crouched behind the fallen tree, snow settling on his shoulders, breath steady despite the cold slicing into his lungs. Minutes passed. Then shapes emerged. 3 men, wrapped in settler coats, rifles slung low. They slowed when they saw the horse ahead, eyes scanning, confusion flickering. The warrior waited until the lead man's boot crunched within 10 paces. The arrow flew, sinking into the snow an inch from his foot. "Next one goes higher," the warrior called, rising from his cover. The men froze, their hands twitching toward their weapons. "We're just looking for a child that doesn't belong to you," the warrior cut in. "Turn back." The lead man's jaw worked as if chewing on the weight of the choice. Behind him, one of the others muttered, "Not worth dying over." After a long, tense moment, they stepped back, melting into the curtain of snow. The warrior waited until they were gone, then swung back into the saddle behind the mother. "We ride until dark," he said, "and we don't stop where they can find us." By the time they reached the tree line, dusk had turned the snow to ash and the wind to a low, hungry moan. The warrior spotted the cabin through a tangle of pines, half sunk into the earth, its roof bowed under the weight of years and storms. It was a trapper's place, long abandoned, but its chimney still stood. He swung down, took the baby into his arms, and pushed the door open with his shoulder. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of old pelts and smoke long gone cold. He set the baby in the mother's lap while he cleared the hearth, stacking split logs from a pile in the corner. Soon, firelight began to push back the shadows, warming their faces. She pulled the blanket tighter around the infant, her hands trembling. "You've done enough," she said softly. "You could leave in the morning, and no one would think less of you." He glanced over, his eyes catching the glow of the flames. "And where would you go?" She didn't answer at first, staring into the fire like it might tell her. Finally, she said, "My husband doesn't want me. His brothers hate me. My father's land is gone. The only place left is the ground." Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. Not this time. He sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees. "Why marry him?" She looked up sharply, like she hadn't expected the question. "I was told he was kind," she said. "A man who'd lost a wife and needed a family again. I thought I could be that. But the first time I bled without bearing a son, the kindness ended." She brushed a hand over the baby's cheek. "And when she came, he never even looked at her." The warrior's jaw tightened. "Among my people, a child is a gift, whether son or daughter." She gave a faint, sad smile. "That's not the world I was born into." He leaned back, the firelight painting the lines of his face. "Then perhaps it's time to choose another world." Outside, the wind clawed at the walls, but inside, the fire hummed low and steady. The baby stirred, letting out a small, contented sigh. The warrior's gaze softened at the sound, and for the first time since they met, her shoulders eased. Still, neither of them spoke the truth they both knew, that the men who had followed them might not be done yet, and the night was far from over. The wind had dulled to a steady whisper through the pines when it came. 3 hard knocks against the cabin door. The warrior was on his feet before the echo died, bow in hand, eyes narrowing toward the dark wood. The mother froze by the fire, clutching the baby so tightly the child stirred in protest. He raised a hand to her, signaling for silence, then moved to the side of the door, his shadow blending into the dim. Another knock, slower this time, deliberate. "Who is it?" he called in Lakota, his voice low and edged. No answer, just the faint creak of weight shifting outside. The mother's breath hitched. "It's them," she whispered, voice trembling. "They've come to finish it." He shook his head once, not taking his eyes from the door. "Not yet." He yanked it open in a single motion, arrow drawn. The figure on the threshold wasn't one of the men from the trail. This one was older, shoulders draped in a weather-stained army coat, beard heavy with snow. His hands were raised, palms open. "Easy," the man said, his voice cracked from cold. "I'm not here for trouble." The warrior didn't lower the bow. "Then speak quickly." The stranger's eyes flicked past him, landing on the woman. "I saw your fire. Thought maybe you'd share it." She flinched, pulling the baby closer. "Who are you?" "Name's Hollis. Trapper, sometimes guide. Got caught in the pass before the storm." The warrior studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside just enough to let him in, but only after Hollis removed his rifle and set it on the porch. Inside, the newcomer crouched by the fire, rubbing his hands. "Storm's bad enough to bury a man alive if he's fool enough to keep walking. You've got the right idea, hold up here." The warrior stayed standing, his bow still within reach. "You're alone?" Hollis gave a crooked smile. "If I wasn't, I'd be dead by now." His gaze lingered again on the baby. "Pretty little thing. Yours?" The woman didn't answer, but her knuckles whitened on the blanket. The warrior's voice was like stone. "She's not for conversation." Hollis held up his hands again. "Didn't mean nothing by it." But when his eyes dipped once more toward the child, the warrior caught the flicker there, curiosity, maybe something sharper. Outside, the wind rose again, and for the first time all night, the warrior wondered if the storm was the smaller danger. The fire had burned down to a steady orange glow when the warrior caught it, a scent under the smoke, faint but wrong. Not pine, not pelts, something acrid, like black powder long carried against the skin. Hollis sat with his back to the wall, turning a strip of dried meat over the flames, talking idly about trap lines and winters past. But his boots told a different story, not the cracked, salt-crusted leather of a man who'd been caught in a storm, but well-oiled, mud-streaked only at the edges. The warrior's gaze slid to the mother. She was rocking the baby, her eyes fixed on the fire, trying to disappear into the heat. He rose slowly, every movement measured. "You said you came from the pass," he said. Hollis smiled without looking up. "That's right. Then you walked through the drift above Red Knife Creek." "Sure did," Hollis said, gnawing the meat. The warrior stepped closer. "There's no drift this winter. Creek's dry." Hollis's jaw stilled. His eyes lifted, and the easy smile was gone. "Maybe I took a different way," he said. "Maybe," the warrior replied, his voice flat. "Or maybe you've been following us since the ridge." Hollis dropped the meat, his hand inching toward his coat. The warrior's bow was up before the fingers touched fabric. "Leave it," he ordered. The mother shifted, clutching the baby tighter. "Who is he?" she whispered. Hollis's voice hardened. "Doesn't matter who I am. What matters is what I was sent to take." His eyes flicked to the child. The warrior stepped between them. "You won't leave with her." Hollis leaned back against the wall, the flicker of firelight catching the steel in his gaze. "You think those men earlier were the only ones sent? Storm or no storm, they'll keep coming. And when they do, I won't be the one knocking." The warrior didn't move, didn't blink. Outside, the wind rattled the cabin shutters like impatient hands. Hollis's smirk returned, but it was thinner now, meaner. "Guess we'll see how far you get before they catch up." The warrior's voice dropped to a growl. "Far enough to bury anyone who tries." He kept the bow steady until Hollis eased his hands away from his coat, settling back against the wall. But the warrior knew the man wouldn't sleep tonight, and neither would he. The baby had just drifted into a fitful sleep when the sound came, not the soft rattle of wind, but the crunch of boots in snow, more than one set. The warrior's eyes snapped to the door. Hollis's smirk widened as if he'd been expecting it. "Told you," he muttered. The mother stiffened, holding her child so close the baby whimpered in protest. The warrior's bow was in his hand before the second step fell outside. "Stay back from the fire," he told her, his voice low. She slid into the shadowed corner, every muscle tight. A heavy knock rattled the wood, followed by a voice muffled by the storm. "Hollis, you in there?" Hollis didn't answer. His eyes darted to the warrior. "Friends," he said lightly. "You might want to let me do the talking." "You talk, and you'll choke on your tongue," the warrior replied, moving to the side of the doorway. The knock came again, harder, and the latch trembled. "Open up. We know she's inside." The woman gasped, her grip on the baby tightening. Hollis shifted, trying to slide a hand toward his coat again, but the warrior's arrow tip rose, catching the firelight. "Move, and it's the last thing you do," the warrior warned. He waited until the latch strained under the third pounding blow, then yanked the door open himself. The storm rushed in, along with two men wrapped in thick coats, rifles slung across their chests. They stumbled at the sudden movement, one's hand going straight for his weapon. The warrior didn't hesitate. His arrow flew, slamming into the wood beam inches from the man's head. The second man froze, eyes darting between the bow and the warrior's steady glare. "Leave," the warrior said. "Now." The first man recovered enough to snarl, "That child's not yours." "She is now," the warrior cut in, his voice sharp as the wind outside. "Go back to whoever sent you and tell them they'll need more men." Behind them, Hollis leaned just far enough forward to add, "Told you he'd be trouble." The warrior shot him a look that silenced him, then kept his arrow trained until the two men backed into the storm. They hesitated for a breath, then turned, their shapes swallowed by the snow. When the door was shut again, the mother's breath shook out of her like she'd been holding it for hours. "They'll come again," she whispered. The warrior nodded once, checking the door's bar. "And we'll be gone before they do." They left before the fire died, the cabin shrinking into the white behind them. The warrior set a hard pace, leading the horse through knee-deep snow while the mother clutched the baby beneath layers of blanket. The moon hid behind clouds, leaving only the pale wash of starlight to guide them. Every few steps, he glanced back, scanning for shadows that didn't belong. By midnight, the trees thinned, opening to the wide, flat shimmer of a frozen river. The ice stretched from bank to bank, a ghostly mirror beneath the snow. The mother's voice was a whisper in the dark. "It's not safe." "Neither is staying here," he replied, stepping onto the edge. The ice groaned under his weight, but held. He tested each step with the butt of his bow, listening for the hollow tones that meant death. The horse followed reluctantly, its breath steaming in great clouds. They were halfway across when the sound came, the unmistakable snap of a rifle being cocked. "Don't move," a voice called from the trees behind. The warrior didn't turn. "Keep walking," he told her under his breath. "We can't," she began, but he cut her off. "Trust me." The baby stirred, sensing the fear in her mother's arms. Another voice joined the first, closer now. "Hand over the child and you walk away." The warrior's reply was calm, almost too calm. "Come take her." A pause, then boots crunching onto the ice. He counted the steps in his head. 3 men, judging by the rhythm, moving slow to keep their footing. At the sixth step, the warrior stamped hard with his heel. A deep crack shot through the ice, spidering toward the men. They stopped, cursing, one firing a shot that went wide, the sound echoing across the river. The warrior grabbed the horse's bridle and urged it forward. The ice moaned, but held just long enough for them to reach the far bank. Behind them, one man lunged forward, and the ice gave way beneath him. His scream was swallowed by the black water. The other scrambled back toward shore, shouting his name. The warrior didn't look back. He led them into the cover of the trees, his breath coming hard now. The mother was pale, clutching the baby so tightly her knuckles were white. "You could have killed all of them," she said. "I could have," he answered, eyes still scanning the dark. "But sometimes it's better to leave one alive to carry the warning." Dawn was bleeding into the treetops when the warrior slowed the horse. The forest around them was thick and still, the kind of quiet that told of places few feet had walked in years. He led them up a narrow slope, snow crunching under each step, until a wall of stone rose before them. At first it looked impassable, but then the mother saw the break, a hidden gap between boulders wide enough for a man to pass. On the other side lay a hollowed glen, sheltered from the wind, a spring bubbling faintly at its heart. Smoke curled from a low lodge of hides and timber. The warrior's dog, a lean wolfish thing with one torn ear, padded out from the shadows and wagged its tail once before circling them warily. The warrior's voice was quieter here. "No one will find you here unless I want them to." The mother slid from the horse, her legs trembling with exhaustion. She looked around as if trying to take in every detail: the pine-scented air, the sound of water, the faint warmth of the lodge's smoke. "This is yours?" "It's ours," he said simply, and for the first time she saw a flicker of something gentler in his eyes. He took the baby from her arms, not roughly, not as a claim, but like a promise. "She'll grow here without fear." The mother swallowed hard, her throat tight. "And me?" "You'll grow here too," he said. Inside the lodge, the air was warm with the smell of sage and wood smoke. Furs lay thick on the ground, and a pot simmered over the fire. He set the baby down within arm's reach of her mother and ladled stew into a bowl, placing it in her hands. She didn't speak at first, just ate in small, steady bites. The quiet was different here, not the tense silence of hiding, but the kind that came when danger was far enough away to let breath return. When she finally looked up, her voice was soft but certain. "I thought I'd lost everything." He shook his head. "You lost what you never truly had. Now you can start keeping what's real." She glanced at the baby, then back to him, and in that moment she understood that whatever had brought him to her that night, duty, chance, or something older, it had changed the course of all their lives. Outside, the sun climbed higher, turning the snow into a field of light. For the first time in months, she let herself believe they had found not just a place to rest, but a place to belong.